that they have a couple of announcements on the way, as is tradition, announcements of announcements. Well, that first announcement was that they were going to be announcing... I swear to God, guys, this is this is my life now. Good morning to you, and welcome back to today's Jrpg Weekly Update. I am SuperDerek, and we got a lot of news to talk about today, starting with a couple of announcements from Square Enix, the first of which is that they were going to be announcing, or rather, the Kingdom Hearts Union Cross team specifically would be making an announcement the following day. I didn't really talk about it at the time, and, well, because you haven't already heard of this, you know it's not really huge news. This turned out to be a mobile game called Project Xehanort. It's just going to be an upcoming free-to-play mobile game coming out this spring, and because of that, we can probably expect that the entire rest of the Kingdom Hearts series is going to hinge on some events within this, within this game. So... you know, and it's also going to, I imagine that this is probably going to include a lot of microtransactions and maybe some gacha mechanics. We'll see what happens here. I'm not super interested in it just yet. We'll have to see what happens. The other announcement that Square Enix was making, though, is that they have two other teams working on two other projects, one of which is coming, quote-unquote, surprisingly soon. So, it's not entirely clear if this is that one mainline game and then the other is a spin-off that's coming surprisingly soon, because they have said that the next mainline game is a ways away. Or are they talking about two spin-off games, one of which is coming surprisingly soon, and they're not the mobile game? And that interests me quite a bit, because I tend to see in my playthrough of the Kingdom Hearts series, where I reviewed all of them, link up here somewhere, by the way, where I reviewed all of them, the non-mainline games, actually, aside from one, tended to be the best of the games. They were allowed to kind of be themselves and go off in their own directions. And they introduced a lot of interesting characters, and a lot of people just didn't end up playing them. I had a lot of fun with them. Anyways, regardless, I'm interested in seeing where the new spin-offs go. And the mobile game, I guess, they said that is going to explore more of like the motivations of why Xehanort turned to the side of evil. Could be interesting, I suppose. So... that was kind of like the big news entry. It was kind of a slow week, but I did see some other stuff that I thought might be interesting, at least to talk about today, including a new port to the PlayStation 4, Little Town Hero, you know, the game by GameFreak that isn't Pokémon, is a Switch title that is no longer a Switch exclusive, and that's really weird to me because, I mean... Nintendo did a lot of promoting of Little Town Hero when they first announced this game. It looked like it was going to be like, you know, before it came out, a lot of people were like, including myself, were like, ooh, this could be really good because Game Freak does some RPGs, and it'd be really nice to see what they do when they're not, you know, tied to the Pokemon franchise. Well, it's received some mixed reception since its release, and maybe the fact that it had a bit of a rough release is why they're expanding their potential marketability to the PlayStation 4, which has more units in circulation and therefore more potential customers. It's entirely a reasonable thing to want to do. I'm just wondering, I mean, in the past, we know that Nintendo has had this thing where relationships would sour if if third-party developers were, you know, in cahoots with other consoles, which notably is why Quintet, makers of Soul Blazer, Earthbound, and Terranigma, which is why when they decided to go and do third-party games for Nintendo Sony PlayStation, rather, they ended up changing their name and creating a parent company, or a shadow company called Shade. So, because essentially, if Nintendo knew you were working with other consoles, they would give you a raw deal. So, I guess that my curiosity here is, I mean, it seems like up to this point they've had a really close relationship, and what might happen with this after Nintendo put a lot of effort into, like, you know, kind of giving this game a little bit of a boost. I don't know. Probably not much, in all honesty, I guess, because this isn't the only GameFreak game that has come out on other consoles. There's, I think, another that came out on PS4. There's one on PC. They're very few and far between, because usually they're just always making Pokemon games. But this time, well, you know, I think we're getting off topic a little bit here. But point is, hey, if you're interested in Little Town Hero on PS4, there's a chance you could get it here in the States. It's only been announced for Japan so far. That said, Little Town Hero is getting a physical release here in the US and in Europe on Nintendo Switch by Xseed. So that's pretty interesting to me. We'll see if that ever comes to the stateside on PS4, though. No idea. We also got a release date update for Compile Heart's new Azure Lane Crosswave. It's going to be coming to PC and PlayStation 4 on February 13th of this year in the United States, and on the 21st in Europe. So about a week and a day after it's released here in the West, in the States, it'll go over to Europe. And for the Nep fans out there, and I know there are plenty of you, Neptune of Neptunia will be available as a free download during the first month of release if you pick up this game. If you want to play as Neptune, you can do that. Afterwards, after the first month or so, I guess you'll have to pay, which is kind of how they're going to try to make sure people buy it quickly on release and, you know, help improve sales and all that. In other news, 2019 RPG of the Year winner Disco Elysium has released a free update with new features to all versions of the game. The new update introduces support for ultra-wide monitors for the few of us out there who can afford them, and by the few of us, I mean the few of you who can afford them. And it also adds a new hardcore difficulty option, promising that the players will experience the following: fail more, be poorer, get screwed by Big Pharma, and learn to love drugs. That is from the official press release. So I guess that they're really targeting right here is a more relatable experience for millennials out there. And speaking of free updates, Kingdom Hearts 3 released a new update alongside their Remind DLC, and this new update adds the new Keyblades Oathkeeper and Oblivion Keyblades, as well as a bunch of new skills for Sora, like 6 or 7 skills, I think. I didn't count them, but they look pretty cool. In SuperDerek news, on Friday of last week, you may have seen that I released a new review of Super Mario RPG on Super Nintendo. So if you haven't seen that, hint, hint, there's a link over there. You could go check that out. I'd really appreciate it. And this is my first 4K 60 frames per second video that I've ever released on YouTube, and I'm pretty happy with the way that it came out. That said, I did run into a few scaling issues that I'm not super happy with in the scaling of the 480p content to 4K. Premiere did something weird, and I'm finding a workaround for that so it doesn't look super filtered when I finally get around to my review of Secret of Evermore, which should just be around the corner. In community news, I would like to remind everybody that today, Radiata Stories turns 15 years old. That's right. And I'd like to remind everybody that the hashtag Revive Radiata still exists. So, you know, if you like Radiata Stories and are interested in, you know, contributing to this movement, this would be a pretty good day to do so. In this week's JRPG Weekly Forecast, we've got Arc of Alchemist. It's an action RPG from Compile Heart. It's coming to PS4 and Nintendo Switch on January 30th. And Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire. It's a Western RPG from Obsidian that's coming to PS4 and Nintendo Switch and the Xbox One on January 28th. And then rounding out the month, I guess we've got Skellboy. It's an action RPG from Umaki Games, and that is going to be coming to the Nintendo Switch exclusively on January 30th. And that leaves us with today's question of the week. And my question for you guys is, who is your favorite RPG villain and why? And just to keep things interesting, I like to take a couple of villains off the table because they always seem to dominate questions like this. And of course, you probably already know that I'm talking about Sephiroth and Kefka because those are the main ones. And then even I guess Luca Blight comes up a lot in this discussion. But I'm kind of curious about what you guys think about what makes for a really interesting villain. What makes you really hate a villain or love to hate a villain or makes you afraid of a villain? You know, what's something that a villain can do that that really inspires you to defeat them, right? That's what I really want to know, because this came up in a stream on Twitch last week, and the subject of the best villain came up, and I honestly, none of the villains ever really left a really lasting impression on me, except for maybe Gygas, and that was just because that was my first, right? And it took me months to defeat him because I couldn't figure out the trick, and I'm not going to talk about what that trick was in case anybody here hasn't played it yet. You should play Earthbound right now. But anyways, I thought about it, and I think that the closest I can come up with for myself is probably from Dragon Quest V. It's this dude named Bishop, and I'm not going to tell you what he does. As a matter of fact, nobody here tell anybody else what the villain did in explicit terms. Don't say what the events were that happened. Don't spoil the game, but if you could explain how what the villain did affected you, what about their actions made them particularly evil, let me know, because I'm interested in maybe playing a game next that has a really interesting villain that you just really want to build yourself up to finally defeat them. And Bishop from Dragon Quest V is, I think, the closest thing that really fills those shoes for me, because you know, aside from the fact that he loves to enslave children in his spare time, and that's pretty bad in and of itself, and he also does murder, but I think one of the things about this that really affected me is that he made it a very personal murder, and I'm not going to talk too much about that because you should definitely play the game before the new movie comes out on Netflix. That is. And yeah, and I think that that's part of what a villain needs to do, is they need to make the issue really personal to the player, I think. And that's what gets you invested, and that's what makes you want to get stronger and then eventually kill that enemy, that big bad evil guy. And the thing is, Bishop wasn't even like the big bad evil guy. He was like second or third in command or something, and he still steals the show. Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. I'd be really interested to hear your subject or your response down in the comments down below. If you like the JRPG Weekly Update, I really appreciate those thumbs up if you're interested in doing that sort of thing. Anyways, guys, I am SuperDerek. Thanks for hanging out, and this has all been news to me. Have a good week, everybody.